Welcome to the Thoroughly Wrong Project with Lalo and Bob. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. Let's jump right into that weekly dose of things you can disagree with. Take it away, guys.
Good morning and welcome to the Thoroughly Wrong Project. It's a nice morning here in Bakersfield, California. I've already been to Starbucks, had a great morning. Today we have a guest, and Lalo, this one belongs to you.
Hey, so today we have Dan the man. Dan what is it? Tax is theft. Taxation is theft.
Taxation is theft.
And he's a self-proclaimed libertarian, right? I'm sure you have a.
It's complicated. I try not to use that L word.
You don't like labels.
Yeah, I mean, if I take any label, it's voluntarist.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I do try to stay away from labels.
And
voluntarist?
Yeah.
All right.
And I've met you. We did a stream together with another political commentator a few weeks ago. And I was very intrigued by your ideas. And I kind of want to just take it a deeper dive into them. Can you give us a quick bio background type of thing on yourself?
Sure. Man, I guess since we're going to be talking politics, I'll kind of give my political upbringing. I grew up in Los Angeles kind of as a left Democrat. And the first time I voted for Obama because we were in the middle of this Afghanistan war with Bush, and he had just started this thing, and it had been going on for years, and I was like, this is nonsense. We're just there for oil. And so I voted for Democrats because I thought they were the anti-war party. And then, quickly found out that wasn't so true. And shortly after that, I discovered Ron Paul and became a big fan and kind of went along that path. And then I saw how, I kind of I don't know if I ever called myself a Republican, but I was supporting him because he was in that Republican Party. And I saw how they screwed him over. So I was like, that's not so great either. Then I saw I started getting interested in taxes. And as I say, taxation is theft. So I found the Tea Party. And then I saw them get infiltrated by the Republicans, and now they had this reputation of being this racist group and blah, 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 all this other stuff, when they started out as just one issue, no taxes. And so from there, I stumbled on the Libertarian Party, and I supported them for a little bit, and they had a presidential candidate. I can't even think of his name right now, which is funny because he couldn't tell where there was a geography pop quiz when he was on national media. But anyways, this guy, I liked him for the first year, but then the second time he ran, I could tell he was just pandering because he was, I got to meet him. I had a one-on-one conversation about taxes, and he did not believe that taxation is theft, but he said it during his speech when he won the nomination. He's like, yeah, taxation is theft. And I'm like, oh, you're just a lying piece of shit like everybody else.
Gary Johnson,
sorry, yeah, Gary Johnson. I don't know why I blanked on that, but hopefully I'm allowed to swear on the show.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We get encouraged, actually.
So I got disappointed by that. I decided I'm going to run for president. So I ran with the Libertarian Party, and then I just kind of got disappointed with the entire party overall because there are lots and lots and lots of problems within that party. So I'm kind of politically homeless right now. I'm really just kind of, I do have my my political goals that I'm trying to achieve through several not-for-profit organizations. They're not incorporated government nonprofits because I like to stay away from government as much as I can. But so I'm just kind of doing my own thing, trying to educate people into what's really going on and try to get people to live their own lives and stop living the government's life or the life that the government wants them to live. And so that's kind of the mission I'm on now.
Okay. So when it comes to your political ideology, would you say that's your biggest, your issue number one is the taxes?
It's difficult to say. I think I mean, if I wanted to boil it down to one word, I would say oppression. I would say taxation is oppression. When you have an organization that's running around stealing from everybody, that's oppressive. But also, in talking to so many people, especially when I ran for president, and everybody was bringing up all these different issues, from abortion to reparations to immigration and everything else. It's like I could see how it all boiled down to taxes. Uh, we have this big BLM movement that kind of started from police shooting innocent unarmed people, and it's like, well, that's because of taxes. Yeah, I mean, like we can be mad at the police all we want, but at the end of the day, we're still paying their salaries, and there's nothing we can do about it. But if you eliminate those taxes and give us an opportunity to say, well, yeah, like you guys are bad employees, we're going to stop paying you, and we as the citizens are their employers, then we actually have some control over the situation. But by agreeing to a system of taxation where we have to pay no matter what, we've basically given up all of that control. So any issue that you look at, like you can really tie it back to taxation, and that's really like the biggest chokehold that the government has over all of us. So that's kind of why I do care about a lot of different issues, but that's kind of like always why that's like the linchpin for everything that I talk about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I mean, I I kind of have that same like mindset that a lot of issues stem from another issue,
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's always kind of been that like wealth inequality, pretty much. That if you kind of just, you know, this causes this and that causes that, like you could kind of stem it all the way back to wealth inequality and, crime rates, theft, all that kind of stuff stems from, wealth inequality. And I do agree that taxes are very, I mean, at least the way the tax system works right now, it's out of whack for sure. But I mean, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're asking for like zero taxes, right? You're asking for like just a change in the tax system and the tax codes as it is right now, or are you just like we shouldn't be taxed at all?
Well, that really depends on your definition of the word tax, because if you, if you treat the word tax as something that everybody has to pay no matter what, then yeah, I want to get rid of all that. But that doesn't mean that the government can't raise money. That doesn't mean the government can't exist. It just means, we have to agree to give them money. So, for example, I'll just use the post office because that's a system that's already there. It's well known. When we buy stamps from the government to put on a package, like we're voluntarily giving them money, and you could argue that it's a tax. Because historically, like the government has raised revenue and they've called it tax with tax stamps, and you would buy a stamp and you'd they had, if you were importing or exporting through a port, every package had to have a stamp on it, and it was proof that you paid a fee to the port to use the port. And so like a stamp it's more voluntary. It's okay, I want the government to do something for me, I'm going to give them money. And you could call it a tax. I wouldn't really call that a tax. It's more like purchasing a service. But that's kind of where the debate gets in. Like, I don't care if you call it a tax or not, really. So yes, taxes can be there as long as there's no coercive end to it. So as long as we're not forcing somebody to pay for something they don't want, as long as I'm not being paid to drop bombs on foreign countries, or being paid to even to fund an education system that I believe is failing. When I would rather say, hey, I want to take my money and invest it in a different form of education that's gonna better my community. We should be able to make decisions with our money, and when we just give it, when we're basically forced at gunpoint to give it to the government, we have no control over that, and that's the part I'm trying to fix. Is let's get rid of the part where if you don't pay it, the government's going to come and throw you in a cage.
Okay, and you don't see any like issues arising in a way of like, hey, well, like, I mean, like any town, let's take, for example, Bakersfield. There's like, the east side that we have over here, which is generally like lower income, and then there's like the west side of Bakersfield. And how you're explaining it, like, hey, kind of more voluntarily giving money to like the government to do this, like, hey, we want, another, another stoplight over here, or we want, a better sidewalk over here. You don't see an issue arising where one area of like a certain town or a certain area can afford to do that because, they're wealthier overall. And then the lower income side of towns or areas kind of, they don't have that ability to like, hey, let's all raise money and, build something right here for us.
Right. And I think that's, here's the thing. I think what a lot of people are always looking for is a perfect system, and there is no perfect system. When humans, however, whether you believe in evolution or creationism, when humans ended up here on Earth, it was not a perfect system. There were dangers out in the world. Life was risky. It still is today. And I think, we kind of have this mentality that we live in a safe place and the government's here to take care of us, and we have all these stoplights and those keep us safe. The reality is a lot of the things that we look at as necessary for our safety and survival are absolutely not. And we don't need to spend money to survive, to have basic needs met. That's basically an effect of having a system in place that creates, I'll bring this to your issue, that creates that wealth inequality. Because, going back to the beginning, people weren't running around saying, hey, I need a job so I can eat. They were saying, hey, I need to find food so I can eat. And whether that's hunting and gathering or, whatever it is, or supporting somebody else so that they can go out and get some food. That's what it was. It wasn't like, oh, I got to get a job. I have to go find a factory that's going to give me some coins so I can eat something. And if we look back far enough and like, how did this really happen? And, also to your point about wealth inequality, we always look at these problems as if the problems themselves are the root, when the reality is these are all symptoms and the root is an action that somebody did. So, for example, you can't walk out and say, oh, I'm going to wealth inequality and do something. No, if you could say, I'm going to create wealth inequality, and how are you going to do that? Well, you could set up some tricky laws that are going to steal from one group of people and give other people a better benefit. Yes. And so if you look at it like that, then wealth inequality is the symptom, and the problem is that these other people are running around and they're setting up systems that they're trapping us into. And a lot of these systems have to do with debt and everything else. And so, you look at I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. I'll bring it back in a minute, but we're kind of going off. We have a system where like 85% of the United States is in debt by an average of $145,000 per household. There's I can't find an exact number on this, but there is a large percentage, not a majority, but a large percentage of people who have a negative net worth, which means they have more debt than they have assets. And for somebody to be forced to labor 40 hours a week or more just to keep a roof over their head that they don't even own, that as soon as they stop working, it's like, sorry, you can't pay the rent. You have to go. You don't have a roof over your head anymore. That's absolute nonsense. Like that's not a natural condition of humanity. This was created. And I know, like, when I talk to this, a lot of people, it's like, it's a thin line to walk, right? Because you have some people who are saying, yeah, so we should just steal all the property and make it owned by the people who are living in it. And then you have the other people saying, well, no, but that's wrong. That's stealing. And those people just have to deal with it and get a job. But the reality is there are underlying oppressive forces that are creating that position and forcing people into that position. And that's really what we have to address. And when we address that issue, and we understand that we have laws in place that are forcing people into debt and poverty, and we eliminate those, and a lot of those are done through taxes, then what we'll have is, I mean, we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We have plenty of abundance here. And if we get rid of these oppressive laws, then everyone will have so much that we won't be sitting around talking about, oh, well, if we get rid of taxes, how are we going to have traffic lights? That's just going to be like, why would we even that's a silly conversation to have. We have so much. Let's just build traffic lights. And then the question is like, are we building too many? And that's another story. But yeah, so sorry to be so long-winded on that answer, but yeah, that's kind of how I see things.
No, you're good. Yeah, I guess for me, I'm very much on like I don't know if you remember, but I was very much on like the socialist, like side of, like how we should run our economic system. And I think a lot of people when they hear that word, they, big government kind of just comes to mind, and I think,
Right.
I'm pretty sure you're pretty anti like big government,
Yeah.
But I also think that, I mean, the way our government is set up right now, it's very flawed. So I think we kind of have to change that first, our like way and our systems that run our government, because I do think we need, a strong federal government when it comes to things like healthcare, maybe even like education. Because for me, I mean, to me, healthcare should be like a right. Like you shouldn't have to worry about, hey, I need this procedure done, or I need this, blood work or lab test done. But I'm gonna have to hold off because, I can't afford it right now. And that kind of like blanket of healthcare over, a population of, 350 million people. You kind of need like, a federal government to kind of oversee that and to make sure everything's, running the way it should be. So I guess for me, that like going down that road of like, hey, just, hey, big government, just like leave us alone. We're going to live our life the way we want to live. And if we need your help, we'll ask you for it, I think that could kind of lead to a very like fractured country where you have a lot of like different factions, like, depending on where you live. And I think you kind of need like a big entity to kind of bring us together and be like, hey, like, yes, you have your freedoms and yes, you could live the way you want, but there's also certain things that you have to do because they benefit everybody. Like universal health care, like, hey, you can't, neglect this, side of your town because it's poorer than the other side. Certain regulations, especially when it comes to business. Because I mean, the way we have it now, if we like deregulate, businesses, I feel like they'll just go off, off the cliff when it comes to like, hey, we're gonna not pay you well. We're gonna, pollute the water, pollute the air. So you kind of need some sort of regulations, some sort of, big government telling them like, hey, we know this makes you, the most money if you run things this way, but we need to take care of the people first, not your bottom line, if that makes sense.
All populations need control. They do. That's just, you can't, I grew up in West Virginia. So if you let the deer population go, it overruns itself. If you let children go, it overruns itself. If you let businesses go, they'll pollute the planet. I mean, it just seems like we are fairly selfish organisms here rolling around on the earth. And if we don't have some sort of system of control, and I'm not saying that we need to be under the thumb, a child growing up with learning how to control itself is a better adult. So we need some system of control in order to have a cohesive society, because let it go and the whole world's going to be for itself, man.
Right. And I agree with a lot of that, but, there's a lot of really interesting counter arguments to all of this. So, like with pollution. So, a lot of this I hear is yes, if you leave some companies completely unchecked to do whatever they want, they're going to dump whatever they want wherever they want. At the same time, we kind of already live in that system, and all of us are guilty, where, the biggest landfills are filled up with trash from, just us, plastic, plastic and all this other, chemicals and everything that we're just throwing into landfills. And that's us. That's not, these big corporations. And yes, you do have big corporations that are going to say, oh, well, we've got all this toxic waste, let's just throw it into a river. But the reality is, like, that was, before the government came in with like these big regulations on, how to, ecological regulations and all this other stuff. What would happen is they dump their stuff in the river. It would go downstream and pollute someone's land, and that person would come up and sue the crap out of them. And that was a very practical way to take care of that. We can look at, a lot of this just comes from, education as well, because we have, there's a pollution problem where people are flushing their expired pharmaceuticals down the toilet, and that's creating ecological problems.
Yeah.
And it's not like, and that's like, it's actually like a pretty serious problem, even though we're just like, oh, it can't, like, there can't be that many pills going down the toilet, but there are. And it's like,
when
all,
80% of Americans are on some form of pill or other. So.
Right. But it's like, we don't want a government that's going to be like, oh, we're going to put a meter on your sewage pipe and to measure how much chemicals are coming out to make sure you're not polluting. We don't want that kind of system. And the reality is, like, our selfishness will actually help us to not do that. All it really takes is a little bit of education, and people will stop doing it. Because why? I mean, because there are so many of us that are like, yeah, we should save the planet. We do like that there's beautiful land, and we shouldn't be polluting it, because we're selfish and we want to see a beautiful earth. We want to live in a beautiful place. So yeah, I think there's we have to find like a happy equilibrium there. But also back to the healthcare, it's, so healthcare is a difficult one, because this is a scarcity of resource problem, right? Like, we only have so many doctors, and it's easy to say, like, oh, well, in a country of 350 million people, if 100,000 people need to have heart surgery, well, how many heart surgeons are there who can actually do that job? And will they even imagine if they weren't even charging a single dollar for it, would those 100,000 people be able to get that heart surgery before they die, in this line of 100,000 people? And yes, that's not the only reason contributing to the cost, but that's one of the reasons contributing to the cost, because it's a scarcity of resource. We literally don't have more doctors. Now, I would say to look at some other factors here. Why don't we have more doctors? Because everybody hears like doctors make so much money, and a lot of people are trying to get into med school to make some good money. Well, first of all, the doctors that are just chasing paper aren't usually good doctors. Usually those are the people who will sell you on more surgeries and problem, services than you need. And they won't tell you just go get some exercise and start eating healthy, which will actually fix a lot of people's problems. I know it doesn't like cure cancer or make your heart problems go away, but like that's a major issue that doctors don't ever really talk about. But then you also have a scarcity of doctors, because you have government regulations that are in place. And this all comes down to lobbying and corruption, which I'm sure you guys all agree on. You have doctors and doctors organizations who go to the government and say, hey, we want to make sure we can charge more money, so don't let too many people become doctors. And so they put regulations in place that even if you graduate 100% from your med school, you're not guaranteed to become a doctor, because you have to go through like all these other processes, and we have limited space. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so they actually cap the number of doctors that there are people that can become doctors every year. And the same is true for medications. Like I hear, the cost of healthcare is really expensive, right? That's a fact right now. And a lot of people can't afford it. That's also a fact right now. So if somebody gets sick right now, we're told by a lot of politicians that the only way to fix that problem is for the government to pay for it. You will never hear them say it's to get the prices down. Because if the prices come down, most people will be able to afford whatever they need. I've been actually smuggling insulin from Mexico to the United States to prove this point, because people say, like, why is insulin so expensive? It's like $100 for a month's supply, depending on what you need. $100 for a month's supply is $1,200 a year. That's a lot of money, especially on somebody who's not making a whole lot. And when you look at this problem, it's easy to say, yeah, these companies, they're greedy. We know the cost to manufacture that $100 of insulin is only like $3. They're ripping us off. And it's like, yeah, but if you go to Canada or Mexico, it's only $12 instead of $100, and it's the same brand. And those companies are just as greedy there. How are they able to get away with selling it for $100 in the United States? And the reason is the government. And yes, it's government rules who were created by these greedy corporations to help boost their profits. Absolutely. But without the government being able to put those regulations in place, they wouldn't be able to get the cost up that high. And so when we can at least say, okay, let's forget about a socialized system for a minute, because even if we were to create that, we still have the problem that the government would have to tax a whole lot more money to pay a whole lot more to these greedy corporations whose CEOs are going to get filthy rich off of it. So let's fix the price problem first. And I think when we do that, what we're going to see is most Americans are going to be able to afford most of their healthcare and medications. And then once we solve that problem, then all of the money that's going into charities to do research on new diseases and to help people who can't afford their medication, everything from donations to nonprofits and all these other things, we're going to see that is going to pick up a big amount of what's left. And plus, if we get rid of the regulations that are preventing people from practicing medicine, think about this too. Most nurses that are, they're not allowed to do anything without supervision from a doctor, but there are, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of nurses, that are perfectly capable of starting their own practice. And yeah, they're not going to be doing heart surgery or anything like that, but they can tell you, yeah, go get your labs. We'll tell you if your cholesterol is high, these things, which is basic medication for a lot of people. And that alone would take the stress off of all these other doctors who are basically doing this really basic stuff, which is they're overqualified for, and it leaves them with more time and resources to help treat other people who have more important issues. And across the board, prices come down, more people get to afford what they need, and there's more doctors to actually do what they need. So that's kind of sorry, again, long-winded, but that's kind of how I see that one.
Yeah, and I guess to me, healthcare is a very, like you said, it's a very unique issue, because the way I see it, healthcare, the demand is very like inelastic, like if you're diabetic, you need insulin. Like, what are you going to do? Like not take it? And then because then you'll just die, So it's one of those things where kind of like in one way, it's kind of like gas, people always, especially right now, like, oh, gas is so high, but I mean, at the end of the day, like you still, like you need it to get, where you want to be and where you want to go. So to me, healthcare and the price, like the cost of that people have right now, it's one of those things where I think a lot of companies charge what they charge because not only because, hey, we have to meet all these, government regulations, so our costs end up being this way, but they charge what they charge because they can, and they know people are going to have to pay it, and they know people are, or not even just the people, but like the insurance companies, it's kind of it's a very like lovely relationship between, hospitals and doctors and all these insurance companies.
Well, to that point, let me tell you about my friend and this is actually who I was thinking about when I was talking about the heart surgeries. He just had a triple bypass done, and it's really like his story is he went to he thought he was having a heart attack, so he went to the hospital. It wasn't anything serious, but they were like, yeah, you know what? He was already planning to get a different procedure done, and they were like, no, we need to do a bypass. We need to transfer you to a hospital. This was in McAllen. We're going to transfer you to a hospital in Houston, where there's a heart surgeon who can do this. And so again, first of all, limited supply of doctors who can actually do this, but he's in the hospital on day one, and they say, yeah, we're going to see if we can get a bed out there in that hospital so that we can transfer you to that hospital and get you the surgery. That's day one. Day two, yeah, we're still waiting to see if we can get a bed. Day three, he's like, you know what? I feel fine. Can I go home and wait from home? and they're like, oh, no, you need to stay here. A week later, and these guys, you know how hospitals charge. They're probably charging like $10,000 a day to be there. But this guy has insurance, and they know they're going to bill his insurance, right? They're just running up this bill. He's filling in a hospital bed, preventing possibly somebody else who needed to get that bed who might not have insurance. And this isn't even his fault, because the hospital's the one who's basically saying, yeah, well, we know this guy's good. He's got insurance. He's paid for. And they were against his will trying to keep him there. And I was telling this story to somebody else, and they said that exact same thing happened to his, I think it was his mother-in-law, where she was in a car accident, and she went to the hospital, and a couple days later she was fine to go, but they just kept saying like, oh yeah, just stay here and rest and rest and rest. Same thing. She was there for about a week, and then she was like, hey, you know what? I actually have plans this week. I didn't know I was going to be here this long. Can I go? And they, oh yeah, you're fine to go, and they just let her out. And so it's like, how long would they have held her there? So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like when these people see an opportunity to take advantage of these things, they're absolutely going to pull on it. But you have to also consider when we create a system like universal healthcare, where no matter what it is, like any person can go to the hospital for like the smallest thing and be like, yeah, you know what, I just want to lay in a hospital bed all day because it's going to make me feel better, even though I just have a runny nose. The hospitals are going to be like, we don't care. We get paid either way. The government is going to pay us. We don't care. And so now you have all these people who are taking up more space in hospitals, and this is why you end up with really long lines, as they have in like in Canada and Sweden. I don't say that from the news. I say this from people I know personally who've told me about really bad situations in waiting lines, getting healthcare in those places. So yeah, I mean, I agree with the sentiment. Everybody should have access to healthcare, but how we make that happen is really, really something we have to try and foresee all of the unknown circumstances that might arise and all of the unknown incentives, because that's where so many government programs have failed. When they, like, a lot of welfare programs have created more welfare, not because they were intended to do that, but because when they created the programs, they didn't put that much thought into what are the unintended consequences of what the actual policy is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we can look, because I have heard of like places like Canada, how, they'll have to wait like weeks or months for like even like a consultation, so I do think there's they have tried it and they're trying it now. And there's obviously issues, but I think we can look at those issues and kind of at least try to figure out how to, move around them and how to make sure that doesn't happen here. Because I hear that a lot from people when, I advocate for like universal healthcare, like, oh, well, go to like England or Canada and, try to get, a doctor appointment there, tell me how it goes. But what I tell them is like, that's like your counter argument to my proposal is just like, hey, let's not do it because look at these super long wait lines. So let's just keep things the way that they are. And I'm pretty sure that's not your argument. Like, you don't want to keep things the way they are now. But I think, especially when it comes to healthcare, like if it was more accessible to people, yes, people would go more often to the doctor just because, hey, I don't feel good. Let me go to the doctor and check it out. But a lot of it creates more preventive care, So people don't wait until like they're about to die to go to the hospital and, flood the ER. They can go, hey, to my local clinic. I don't feel good. Here, take this. And they might, find something out in their blood work or lab work before it gets to that point of, hey, you're going to have to rush to the hospital. And now you have no choice but to go and like take up a bed that, if we would have treated you like 2 months ago when you didn't start feeling well, you wouldn't be here in the first place. So I think there's
a point here.
Yeah, go ahead.
It may sound like I'm off topic, but I'm not. since we're talking about healthcare, we have this huge problem. There are 500,000 heart surgeries in the United States every year, and most of them are self-caused. So this issue we talk about healthcare, why don't we start educating people about taking better care of themselves? And I know that sounds off topic, but listen, all the problems that we're talking about here are so intertwined with each other. Like Dan wants to take out this part, and Lalo, you want to take out this part. All these things are tied together, and it's coming down to not inequality, not economic inequality, not taxes, it's the fucking choices that people make that when they're left to their own devices, it's like, we want people to have more food. So, okay, cool. So corporations jump in there and they say, all right, here's our dollar menu. And our dollar menu causes obesity, and obesity causes health problems, and health problems cause you to need to go to the doctor. And then corporations who run that side of the equation, they're like, cool, we'll take all the obese people, all the sick people, all the people that need heart surgery, and we'll do what Dan's doing, what Dan's talking about. We'll line them up. It seems like everybody in our culture is getting in line to fuck themselves over. And we want, when we talk about libertarianism or egalitarianism, where everybody's equal, where everybody's free, when everybody's cut loose, they just make poor choices. This, to me, this comes down to education. We need to start earlier about telling people about the systems of control that they need to avoid, the health problems that they can avoid, and the racism that they can avoid, the violence that they can avoid. And all this comes down to educate our fucking kids for a better future. My whole issue here is we need to educate ourselves, because the mess that we're in is because we've blinded ourselves thinking that this system that we're in is the best one. We need to just stop right now and change the education system. Then you have a better society, because all this other things, what we've come down to is stubbornness and oppression and racism, and here's my little clan of people, and this is what we believe, and fuck you, and fuck you, and fuck you. And everybody's just like so angry with each other, when we just need to stop and listen and do a reset on our education system. And Dan, we can't even do that, because as soon as we do it, we got a group of people who rise up and saying, I decide what my children should learn. And man, what the fuck? I'm just so tired of all these groups who want freedom their way, and they're not listening to anyone else. So what do we do here? What do we do now?
I mean, I agree with you on a lot of that. But at the same time, the public education system that we have is completely polluted by corporate interests through government. I mean, when I was going to school, we had nothing but Coca-Cola vending machines and Pizza Hut, greasy Pizza Hut pizzas at our, for lunch. And, and then on top of that, like we're educated on like the food pyramid and, milk is good for you and all this other stuff. And like, I mean, this just blew my mind, because I just found out how bad that stuff is, like, I don't know, maybe a decade ago. But it's like, and then like you look at the history, like, wait, why were they pushing milk so hard? Well, it was because of war. The government like basically subsidized all these milk farmers to start overproducing milk. And then they're like, well, we have all these farms. What are we going to do with all this milk? Let's just tell people it's good for them and make them drink it all. And going back to your original point, like that created a bunch of health problems. So I completely agree with you on that stuff. But education is like, it's a really difficult issue, because even if you have one system, like, so let's say everybody's forced into the same system with the same curriculum. Now, like you said, people are going to fight over, okay, forget about the freedom, and I'm going to teach my own kids, if they are going to this, those same people are going to say, well, if my kids are going to that school, I'm still going to want to decide what they're learning. And so now everybody whose kids are in there is going to have their own opinion about, you know, what's going to be in there. Like they're fighting right now over critical race theory. Should it be there? Should it not? Should we eliminate certain things from the history books, and, you know, all these things? And it's like that fight is always going to be there. And at the end of the day, especially when we have a culture now where most voting adults were raised in American public education schools.
Right.
Like those are the same people who are then going to be saying, this is what we should be teaching our kids. And now you have a majority who's basically just saying we should be teaching them the same things I learned when I was a kid, even though a lot of that stuff might be wrong. That one is a really, really difficult problem to untangle. And I'm not sure that I have an answer for it to fix how miseducated everybody is. But one of the reasons I do say the freedom to educate your own kids is so important is because if you are one of the few people who have learned from the mistakes of the public education system and you have gotten wise to all these things about how screwed up our nutritional diet is, and you want to fix that, like to be able to make those kinds of decisions when you know the red, and you know, I totally get your point. There are people who think they know the system is wrong and that they're right, and they're even more wrong than the system is. But you know, that's kind of our freedom to decide that. And yeah, a lot of people are going to make bad decisions. And you know, but that's kind of, I think it's wrong to tell someone, like, if they believe something bad and they're gonna make their life worse and they're gonna eat junk food and all this other stuff, like teach them, you know, tell them, give them the information. But I think it's wrong to say, like, no, you're not allowed to do that. If, you know, maybe, I mean, some people, they know this is bad for them and they just love eating it. And they're like, I don't care if I die young. I can't imagine life without ice cream and cherry pie every night.
Right.
That's me talking.
Well, I hear that all the time. I'm a whole food plant-based. I'm a vegan and I exercise a couple hours a day and I really take care of myself. And I try to tell people, you know, I'm way over in left field looking out in the audience when it comes to health and holistic health and mental health. I think all that's tied together. And I do hear those arguments. It's like, you know, you tell somebody's like, you eat too much red meat and this will happen to you. Well, you know, if I can't eat red meat, I don't want to live. It's like, okay, I get that. But why, Dan, am I responsible when the information is out there? It's 2022, baby. I mean, there's lots and lots of studies and lots of information out there that proves a point. And if you eat Big Macs every day and you weigh 400 pounds, you're a fucking walking health hazard. You're going to tax the system in ways that, you know, you're in the way of people who had a car accident, is my point. Why in the hell am I responsible for you making entirely bad choices like that in the face of such profound knowledge, and you ignore it and go down your way? And the way, I think my wife's a teacher, by the way. She's an 8th grade English teacher. So she sees the system as broken. And I think the way to fix the system is a little more European, is start bringing in critical thinking, start bringing in philosophy, start bringing these things in earlier. I didn't even know what critical thinking was until my second year of college when I was 30 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had no idea. I grew up in Appalachia. I immersed myself in hunting and fishing and, you know, mud bogs and drinking beer and doing drugs and doing all the things that come with that culture. I did not wake up to the fact until I sat my ass in a philosophy class at the age of 30. And thank God I did.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I'm here today doing a podcast called Thoroughly Wrong. I might be wrong. You might be wrong, but God damn it, we need to talk about these things. That's my whole point of this podcast. We need to bring these things up and look at them from a critical viewpoint and analyze them and talk about them instead of just closing ourselves off and saying, this is my ism and fuck you if you don't want to do it. That we need to come together as one mind. And I don't agree with everything you're saying. I don't agree with everything Lalo says. And I'm sure you don't agree with everything I say. But the thing is, thank you for listening to me. And that's where we need to come together and appreciate each other's point of view. And instead of saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm not going to listen to you, say, this is my point of view. What do you think? That's how we get through this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, also to your point, like, and what I was saying earlier about like the schools being corrupted by these corporations, like that was so like the schools used to operate independently of federal government, until I think it was one of the Rockefellers came along and proposed this bill for the Federal Department of Education, which basically created a standardized curriculum across the board. And what that did was that event that basically turned it into what it is now, where it wasn't about educating people to be smart or deep thinkers or intellectuals. It was about creating factory workers. And I mean, when you look at like the old school factory system where it's like the bell rings and you get on the factory line and then the bell rings and you go to lunch, like that's exactly what our school system is. Like that's how we were raised, right? Like you can't even like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom during class. Oh, sorry, you need special permission. You need to get embarrassed. You have to go through all this stuff because you're really not supposed to get off the factory assembly line. You're supposed to take care of that in between, when the bells ring.
Right. Now we've come down to the point where you can die on the Amazon floor and everybody's like, don't pay attention to that. Keep working.
Yeah, exactly. So, I totally agree with you. Like that shit, like that's not, memorizing stuff and learning to be a factory worker is not education. Like education is the philosophy and the critical thinking and everything you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the way we solve this. I mean, I listen to everybody's point of view all the time, and Lalo can tell you, and even when you guys were together on the Tommy Nation, my whole point was, you guys are talking about the fucking problem. Where's the solution here? And everybody seems to be like, oh, well, we're stuck talking about the problem. That's cool. That's great. We can talk about your transmission being out of your car all day long. What's the solution? We got to fix transmission. Okay, how do we do that? Well, it's not fixable. We got to replace it. I mean, so we start to talk about, we need to continue to talk about the problems, Dan, but we need to start to talk about how do we fix them now?
Right. And I think to your same analogy, I think part of that problem is that, like we look at the car and somebody says it's the transmission, we need to fix the transmission. And then somebody else is like, no, it's the transmission's fine. It's the engine. Right. And I think that's probably why we spend so much time fighting about the problem. Cause like once we agree on what the problem is, then we can all go fix it. And we'll probably start throwing everything at it. Try this, try that, try that. But yeah, if we don't agree on what the actual problem is, then I think that's part of it also. But I agree. Like we do, myself included, and I try to stop myself from doing it, but we do talk about the problem a lot more, and we should talk more about the solutions.
Yeah, I'm trying to train myself to have the discussions with people that I have with, like, I totally agree that the education system's screwed up. What do you think we need to do to fix it? And most people are just like, I don't know. Well, exactly. Yeah, we just laugh about it.
Turn on the TV and see what they say.
Exactly. Let's see what the government has for us. And on the other side, you've got the extremist, Karens screaming that you're not going to teach my child critical race theory. And then the critical race theorist is like, excuse me, critical race theory is for university level. It's a theory. It's a philosophy. We're not teaching our kids. So then we pull things out of critical race theory and we say, aha, see, this is where we're starting to teach it. And everybody needs to just stop and say, okay, let's take history and philosophy and critical thinking and mathematics, and let's tie them all in together in this beautiful thing, and teach our kids a way to think about them, not how to think about them.
Right.
Yeah, that's my whole thing. I'm just so tired of listening to people argue about things that they have no idea how to fix. It's like it, it's like being in a bad marriage, man. People just fucking screaming at each other and no one wants to fix anything. They just want out.
Yep.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I agree with both of you to some degree. Um, but I also think it's important to talk about the problem. I agree that we need to talk about the solution more, but I think talking about the problem really gets people thinking about what the true root cause of that problem is. Because I think a lot of people are they have like a misconstrued view of what causes what. Like, hey, here in California, like our crime rate right now is like through the roof, or at least it seems to be. Like every day on the news you hear about like all these smash and grabs like at local stores and stuff. And you look at stories like that, and you go to the comment sections, and it's all like, see, this is what happens when you vote liberals into office. And Gavin Newsom did this by releasing all these people out of jail like early. So I think it's important to talk about like, hey, no, like this is what happened, like this is what's happening, and that's what's causing this. And I think once you get people to kind of think that way, or like to think critically, and like, hey, what's causing this? The news is telling me this, but if you really take a deep dive into an issue and research it, you'd be like, hey, that's not true, it's actually this causing that. I think we'll be better equipped to actually tackle the actual solution itself. And to go back a little bit to what Dan was saying, I agree with him that I think we should have we should make better choices. He was talking about like our personal health, and like, hey, we should have that education to like, hey, I know this is bad for me, and I'm gonna go buy groceries instead, and make my own food at home instead of going to McDonald's and just worsening my own health. And then at the end of the day, like Robert, you were saying, I'm going to be a tax and a burden on the healthcare system, where it was unnecessarily done, because I could have just been a healthier person and done that. And I think that's a great mindset and ideology. Like, let's give people all the education, but at the end of the day, like, it has to come from them. Like, it has to be their choice.
Right.
And I agree that people need to have that choice. We shouldn't force people like, hey, you can't shop here, you have to eat here because it's healthier for you. I don't think that's the right way to go. But I think one of our main issues is we have to put people in the position to be able to make that choice. Because I think for a lot of people,
don't you mean have that choice? Because poor people don't really have
right, and
the choice.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. When you have a family of 4 people, that's very like low income. Like, do they have the choice to go buy all these groceries and make food? Yeah, technically, yes, they do have the choice, but they're not able to make that choice because of the situation they're in. It's cheaper for them to buy dinner at McDonald's and the dollar menu for their whole family than it is to buy all these fresh ingredients that on average cost more money. And it's kind of like they're forced into this choice, and it's like a cycle, because then they're forced to eating this unhealthy food, and so they become unhealthy, and then their health worsens. And for their kids, for a lot of these people, poverty is like a cycle. It's like generations deep,
right?
Especially in like certain areas of the country.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a self-feeding cycle. So I feel like we need to create, either like through government, even though I know Dan doesn't like that very much, like create a system that helps people elevate from that to the point where they can actually make the choices that they want. They have all the education and they have the resources available to them to make those choices, to truly make those choices. And I think when we get to that point, people will start to make the better choice for them, you know?
Yeah, I think Dan, you made that point earlier in the podcast. When people are given a choice, they'll make the choice for the greater good.
Right. Well, and I also want to go back to what I was talking about, how, we live in a system where people are forced into poverty and debt because, like, you're talking about they can't make those decisions to buy healthier food. And they're living multiple generations in poverty. And yeah, but let's look at like what's helping make that happen. And we have like, most of the farmland in America used to be owned by like small family farms, and
Right.
and they had to give that land up, and now corporations own all of it. Why? Why did they have to do that? Well, there was property tax, there was inheritance tax, all these taxes, and so like let's say you have a family 100 years ago who owns this farmland, and they die, and they want to give it to their kids. Well, they now have to pay this massive tax, where if they want to pay the tax, they have to sell off half the land, and there's some corporation just sitting there ready to buy it. And then you have all these government policies where, oh, you're not going to be allowed to sell your food on the market unless it meets our quality control, and we're just going to just so happen to make it really difficult for you to even figure out the laws to make sure you meet that quality control. So you're going to have to partner with a corporation who eventually is going to take over your entire farm just so that you can sell your products. And so yes, government has like stepped in and like created all these problems that all the way down through the food chain to, okay, now these like these family farmers, they don't have any land anymore. You're forcing people like into cities, and now you're in a system where like, okay, people are paying property tax. Why is but they don't even see that, right? Because they're renting. But why is their rent so high? Because their landlords have to pay a property tax and include that in the rent. And I know that's, there's definitely plenty of, well, if you eliminated that, the rents aren't necessarily all going to fall down by that much. And yeah, that's a fair point. But like all of these things that are in place, it's like Americans used to own, like more Americans used to own land and homes, and we should be going into a direction where more like everybody should own a home. Like nobody should be paying rent. And especially when we get into circumstances, whether it's a natural disaster or an international pandemic or any of these other things where it's like, oh, we have to shut down the economy and nobody can go to work because it's not safe. Why is everybody sitting in a position where if I don't make my rent or my mortgage, I'm going to be homeless and I can't go to work for the next year because the government says so? That shouldn't be a thing. But if everybody owned their home, then all the money that they make would go right into buying healthy food and into their savings account for a rainy day. So I completely agree. Like, that people are unable to make decisions because they don't have the resources. But again, I go back to, you can't fix the problem with more government when the government created all of these problems to begin with. And we have to start looking at, let's fix these problems by giving freedom back to people. There's so much unoccupied land in this country, but you can't just go there and build a house. You can't just go there and build a farm and start feeding yourself and your family and your community. It's illegal because of the government. Let's start giving people back some freedom to provide for themselves with the resources available that are just on this earth. And that alone, and I know that's not a solution for everything, but I think that's a great foundational start so that people can start, to have more available to them without having to take it from somebody else. There's so much more that the earth can provide for us.
I got a question here, Dan. I mean, we're coming up on the end. We usually go for about an hour because that's about 3 times most people's ability to pay attention. So
yeah.
So you've got, let's take a situation where 2 people are, equal in the beginning, and then one person borrows a little money, and then one person owes that money, and then it comes to the point where I'm going to take this little bit, this little bit, this little bit. Hey, can I put these handcuffs on you? Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. And all of a sudden, one person is in a position where they're just chained the fuck down. And that's where we are. I'm chained down by $130,000 worth of educational debt. I don't own a home. I'm 56 years old. I don't have any retirement because I was in a horrible car accident that took everything away from me. So I'm sitting in a place where I'm 56 looking at retirement, which is bullshit for me 10 years from now, which I'll never make. So I'm chained to the ground. Who am I going to say, excuse me, I need a little, we need to start unchaining me a little bit. What incentive does the government have to start letting us have our freedom back? They don't have any. So where do we start at this point?
I think we have to understand that the government is not going to give us our freedom back. We have to demand our freedom back. And for your particular situation, like I want to bring up the point about debt because like a lot of people will tell you, oh, well, it was your decision to go to college, your decision to borrow that money. But let's look at the actual circumstances here. You were told by a financial institution that it was a safe bet for you to borrow that money by an organization who does nothing but deal with money all day to somebody who is less educated about money, and they typically prey on people who are 18 years old to borrow a large amount of money that should be enough to buy you a house, but you don't get a house for it. And these people who lend the money, they're not stupid. They're smart about money, and they know they know a college education is generally a bad investment. Like there's no guarantee on return.
Right.
And so what they do is they've gotten assurance from the government that they will be able to follow you beyond your death. I've heard of cases in the past where like your college education, like if you die, your kids are going to inherit and they're going to have to pay it. You can't file for bankruptcy anymore. And so normally, like if a bank lends money to somebody who's going to start a business, they understand they're taking on a risk. And if the business fails, they're not going to get the money back. Right. Like that's why they look at the numbers and say, okay, what kind of business is this? Is it safe? Blah, 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 blah. With college education, they don't say, well, what classes are you going to take? What skill are you going to try to learn? Are you going to be able to pay this money? They don't ask those questions because the government says, yeah, just give them the money and we'll insure it. We'll make sure that they have to pay it back, even if they're learning something that's never going to earn them any money. And there's no way they can ever get out of it. And so this is a predatory system. And so, yes, you voluntarily made that decision, but you were basically swindled. And so is everybody else. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence, but it's like you don't know something until you know something. And especially when we have the government saying, oh, this is like, yeah, we approve of this product. And like we live in a society where everybody just trusts the government. So if it has the government stamp on it, it must be okay. Yeah. Like that is a level of coercion beyond comprehension for so many people. It's manipulative, it's fraudulent. And so I hear people saying like, yeah, we need to cancel the student debt. And usually that plan involves we're gonna tax a bunch of money, which is stealing it from other people, and then just pay it off, which means giving all the money back to the banks. Instead, we should just say, no, all of these loans were made under fraudulent circumstances, and we're going to refuse to pay them. And then what are they going to do? Because now somebody had this great quote a long time ago. If you owe the bank $1,000, you have a problem. If you owe the bank $1 million, they have a problem. And if we collectively owe the bank hundreds of millions of dollars in student loans and we just say, you know what, we don't care about credit because we don't need to borrow money anymore, and we're just not going to pay this back, what are you going to do? And if enough of us just stood up and said, this is a fraudulent system and we were robbed, we were coerced, we were scammed, then they don't have much power, and the laws that they have, they don't mean much because they don't have that leverage. So I think like it, back to the question is we really have to, stop asking the government to be nice and please give us back some of our freedom and stop oppressing us. And we just have to stand up and realize that they get all of their power from us, mostly in the form of taxes. That's how they pay their employees and their military, who's going to come knock on our doors and take our stuff if we don't pay the taxes or throw us in a cage. If we don't pay, back the student loan. We have to just stand up to them and say what you're doing is wrong, and we're not going to stand for it. And, we don't care if you change your laws. Like, none of that matters here. There's more of us than there are of you. And so, and I'm not advocating, everybody just, go run and start burning down buildings or anything like that. I know that's how people interpret that message, but, we just have to really make that understanding that most of the politicians in DC and in our state legislatures are bought and paid for by so many corporate interests. We're never going to have the money to outbuy them, and we're never going to be able to cooperate enough to decide who to buy and what to pay them to do. Not that's something we should be doing anyway, because it's unethical. But we have to realize that they're just a bunch of guys sitting in a room trying to figure out how they can rip us all off, and we have to work together and say we're not going to stand for that, even if we have different opinions and different views of the world.
All right, man. You know what happens?
Sorry, long-winded. Yeah, I know.
You know what happens? You know what happens if I don't pay my student loan? Yeah.
Well,
every time I go to work, every time I get paid at my work, they're just going to take part of it. They're just going to take my wages.
Right.
They're going to make me pay it, no matter what the fuck. It doesn't matter. So, I mean, you would have to have a collective of people. And unless you want to be a martyr and, okay, take part of my wages, and now I'm just going to be a louder horn. I'm going to be a louder drum because you're taking part of my wages, and see if I can get people to agree with me. But there seems to be this huge problem that that's shitty, man. Sorry about that. I'm going to continue to pay mine so that doesn't happen to me.
You can also look at getting a job that doesn't withhold anything there, and I know I know at this present point, especially, that's not the best advice, because that limits your, the jobs that you can get. And a lot of times they're going to pay less. But,
and also my health care.
Right. Yeah.
And there's where everything's tied in together.
Right.
You pull one thread and we got a problem.
Right. And I know and I kind of live like outside of the system completely. But yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Like, it is a very well contrived system that they have to make sure that it's difficult for us to escape. But if we can all kind of like, if enough of us can decide, like, hey, we're not gonna play those games. I'm gonna open a business, and I'm not gonna file taxes for my employees. Maybe still give them benefits and things like that. And enough people stand up. Of course, that makes you a bigger target for the government coming down on that business. So it's difficult. But like I said, if enough of us said, even though we disagree, we have to understand that the government is working against us to prevent us from getting out of these traps, then I think it absolutely is possible.
And
it's going to take a lot of work to get there.
I totally agree with you on that point, man. We need to start groupthink on this side, because they certainly have it on that side. And it seems like a defeatist way of, saying it's us versus them. And people are like, that's not how it really is. Like, yeah, it is. It's us versus them. And if they are organized enough to take my cash and spend it on whatever the fuck they want to spend it on, then I need to organize on this side and say, no, you're not going to do that. And I agree with you, man. Totally.
Right.
It's been a good morning. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Lalo, you got anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Dan. I was very intrigued by your point of view for that stream we did a few weeks ago. So I wanted to have you on to kind of, I think I told you to like pick your brain and kind of dive deeper, on some of these ideas and proposals, and just kind of get the information out there for people so they could, kind of begin to think like, hey, there's different, mindsets out there, and it's not just so, red and blue how people think it is today. And I think the more we get that information out there, the more people start to realize, like, hey, we don't have to, stick to these two, parties and these two mindsets, and this isn't all that there is, because I feel like a lot of people think that's how it is today. Like, you're either a Republican
Right.
or you're a Democrat. There's no in between, and there's no other options,
Yeah.
Well, you're either a Republican or a Democrat, or you can't vote in the primary.
Yep.
That's the way it is. Hang on for a second, Dan. I want to talk to you after the podcast. All right?
Yep.
All right, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it. All right, Lalo. This has been a good one.
Yeah.
Fuck, man. It just seems like the more we talk, the more complicated it gets. And the more complicated it gets, it's like you want to come down to one single issue and talk about it, but that seems to be impossible. So,
Yeah, and I mean, it's when you get to issues like on the grand scale, like, it's gonna be complicated. There's so many things, to think about, and scenarios, and it's just a web,
yeah.
So you kind of have to untangle it without, tearing it apart. So,
All right, dude. Well, just remember, everybody out there listening, we might be wrong. We're always wrong. If you have something else to say, please contact us, man. We'll totally have you on. I don't even know where to end this today, because it seems like we covered a lot and we covered nothing at the same time,
there's a lot to cover. So
We got to get started somewhere, though. So
yeah.
This has been Bob,
And Lalo.
and this has been the Thoroughly Wrong Project, and we appreciate you taking the time out to listen to us. Have a good day. Have a good week, man.
You too, man. Before you stop recording, remember to unmute Dan, because then
Yeah,
you'll
yeah.
stay muted. Okay.
Yeah, I got it. Later, man.
Later.
You have now experienced the Thoroughly Wrong Project with your podcast hosts, Lalo and Bob. We can now be found on Pandora Radio, Apple Podcasts, Podium Podcast, or by searching the Thoroughly Wrong Project to locate our YouTube channel. You can contact us directly by email at thoroughly-wrong@gmail.com, or just leave a comment on any of our platforms. Until next time, thanks for spending your valuable time with us, and remember, always speak up and never be afraid to be thoroughly wrong.